think so. We're about, yeah. Amir, you think we should get going?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Well, welcome everybody. My name is John Ellis, class of 1998 and president of the Alumni Association. And I want to thank you all for taking the time today to join us for this virtual town hall with President Byerly. We're pleased to have nearly 400 alumni signed up for this call. I know many of you look forward to hearing about our updates from the college during the annual State of the College address, which is typically held during reunion weekend. In fact, I recall a year ago when President Byerly gave the State of the College address, that after speaking for about 40 minutes on a wide variety of topics, an audience member raised his hand and thanked the president for all the information that had been shared, and also asked her if she had stopped to take a breath during her remarks. I offer this anecdote really to underscore that President Byerly and her administration has always gone to great lengths to ensure that the alumni community is informed as an important partner in the evolution of the college. So to that end, President Byerly wanted to take this opportunity to provide a comprehensive update at a moment in time when it's really most important to hear from the college's leadership. Also joining us today are members of President Byerly's cabinet who will be available to answer questions. And we provided an opportunity for participants to submit questions ahead of time. These questions will inform President Byerly's remarks, and we hope to be able to address many of them by focusing on the topics of the college's COVID-19 response, student life, finance, enrollment, and alumni engagement. President Byerly and I will chat about these topics for the next 40 minutes or so, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. If you have any questions that you'd like addressed during this presentation, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A function. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to President Byerly, who will start the discussion with our most pressing topic right now, which is the college's response to COVID-19.
Thank you very much, John, and thanks everybody who's managed to find time to join us. I know it's one of the paradoxes of the present moment that you feel like your days should be more spacious and that you should have more time on your hands when you are, many people are at home. At the same time, there's such a weight of things on everybody's minds that I know that time is even more precious than ever. And so we really appreciate your taking time out of your day to hear a little bit about things that are happening at the college. I appreciated John also hearkening back to the State of the College address that I typically do at reunion. We wish, of course, that we were gathered in person or that we would be looking forward to gathering in June. But it's wonderful, actually, that technology allows us to speak to more people today than probably we would have gathered in Farallon if it were early on a Saturday morning. So wonderful to have so many of you here with us. If you've seen a couple of the messages that I've put out already, we did a couple of video messages and some written updates. You know that the college has been fully occupied in coping with a lot of the consequences of the coronavirus and COVID-19. Of course, it was an unprecedented event for the college to find itself in a position of sending our students home to learn from their own homes rather than on campus, and to be managing the work of the college remotely as it is largely being handled now. So I want to begin by first noting my deep appreciation to the members of the college community who have stepped up incredibly in this moment. And we can say more about what's been happening in the classroom, what's happening in the way of student support, and we'll talk about some of those topics. I also want to thank the many alumni who have stepped forward to be helpful in this moment as well. We'll talk a little bit more about alumni engagement perhaps later in the hour, but one of the things that was immediately evident as we entered into this period of time is that alumni were very eager to think about how they could be of help to the college. And so quite a number of you have already been in touch to offer to assist students who are relocating, to offer with internship, to help with internships, to offer to support students in a variety of ways. And all of that is deeply appreciated, not only in terms of the material support, but in terms of the message it sends to our students. It's very hard for them to be separated from each other and from their faculty and their coaches and their support systems on campus. And so to know that so many alumni care about them, I think has been incredibly meaningful to them. As I think about where we are at this moment, it's hard to believe that we're at the end of the spring semester. In some ways that feels normal. Students are finishing up classes this week. They're defending honors theses. They're receiving some awards for work that they've done. They're looking back on their time at Lafayette. And in other ways, of course, it feels quite anomalous. One of the things that we've worked hard at is trying to sustain the sense of connection that is so fundamental to the education that we offer here. And so faculty have done, I think, amazing outreach to students in trying to add a personal touch to what might otherwise be a kind of remote feeling associated with learning remotely. In addition, many members of our staff community, many folks on campus, including not only people in campus life, but staff in a variety of functions, have also gone out of their way to engage in lots of personal outreach so that students, even though they're far away, would feel that they're really personally connected to things that are happening on campus. That said, I think one of the things that has been most obvious in this whole situation is that our community has been very resilient, that the students by and large have pushed through. They are doing well. They are finishing their classes. They're very engaged on social media in ways that at times makes it easy to forget that they're not here in person. We were just chatting earlier about today. There's a fundraiser going on this week. The Greek organizations have partnered to do a fundraising effort for Second Harvest in Easton. And so they're doing social media things every day and keeping very engaged and sounding like they're here, even though you'd have to listen carefully to realize it's all happening on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. And so I think that they've coped very well with the change that has taken place, but of course are thinking carefully about their next steps and what their futures look like. For us on campus, one of the things we have to think about is just where this leaves Lafayette at this unique moment in higher education. There are the pressing issues that we need to manage, and we'll talk about some of those, the budgetary challenges, the arrangements we need to make for next year, the thinking that has to go on about Lafayette's long-term future. But it's also interesting just to reflect that this is a really unusual moment in higher education when all colleges and universities are grappling with some very similar challenges. And I mention this because I know from many of my interactions with alumni, emails that I've gotten and conversations that I've had, that many of you are very aware of the articles in the press and things you're hearing from other colleges and universities about their responses and their plans. And so in a way, it has a much more collective feel than most crises that I've managed in the past. Typically, if you're handling a problem on campus, you're handling it by yourself and it's pretty specific to something happening in your community. It's really interesting to have something be a national and global phenomenon where people are thinking collectively about it. And I've been very heartened by notes I've gotten from alums who will just forward me something that they heard about another university. Have you thought of this? Have you heard of this? Are our students having this problem? You get a sense that there's kind of shared problem solving going on. And I think that's really a wonderful testament to the level of engagement that everyone feels. And so as we think about where Lafayette is at this moment, we're in a position of tremendous strength in many ways. Because I like to be on the optimistic side, I've even said to our cabinet, I could imagine worse times for a crisis like this to strike. If this had happened 2 years ago, we would not have been able to finish our capital campaign, which built wonderful resources that we're going to need and draw upon in this moment. If it had happened a year ago, we would not have completed the Rockwell Integrated Sciences Center, our beautiful new science facility that we opened with great celebration this fall. And so we have a lot of big projects just behind us. We certainly have a lot of exciting things ahead of us that we'll have to think about differently in this moment. But we feel that we were pretty well positioned in order to cope with these kinds of challenges. And so we feel fortunate that we have a strong community to draw upon, a strong staff, faculty, and really student community that is very anxious to see the college get back on its feet and move forward in a powerful way, in an innovative way, in a way that reflects on the kind of traditions that have made Lafayette so successful in the past. And so we're happy to have a chance to talk in more detail about some of the specifics of what's happening, but I hope that you'll get a sense that the community has really pulled together in this moment. And while it might feel isolating to think of students being each alone in their homes, working on their work, faculty and staff, each sitting as I am, as you are in front of a computer, it feels actually like a moment of great connection and great energy as people are really thinking together about how Lafayette can move forward in the future. So that is what I would say is a kind of opening to our conversation, and I look forward to your questions, John.
Thank you, Allison. Why don't we just start perhaps with some discussion about the fall. There have been a lot of alumni that are particularly interested in understanding how the college is preparing for the fall semester, and if there's been any guidance given by the state of Pennsylvania in terms of the parameters for or criteria for opening the fall. So any sort of insight you can provide in terms of fall planning would be appreciated.
Sure, absolutely. Number one question on the minds of people on campus as well. In fact, we just sent a memo to the campus community earlier today outlining, the wide range of options that we're considering and the ways in which we'll go about ultimately making a decision about how we're directing our energies for the fall. And that's a great example of something that you've probably read articles in the press about what other colleges are saying or doing or deciding or grappling with because they're not easy questions, particularly for a liberal arts college like Lafayette and a very tight-knit community like Lafayette. It's very hard to be in a circumstance where the thing that is most precious and distinctive to us, our sense of community, is the thing that becomes most difficult to manage in a moment when we have to think about appropriate distance between students, when we have to think about the health and safety of the community, when we have to think about the ways in which our curriculum has been delivered this spring, but what we would like to do differently in the fall, and what it really would mean to reconvene as a campus community. I can say that we've put together some planning groups that are looking at different elements of what the fall semester might look like. There's a group looking at academic continuity led by the provost with some faculty and other colleagues. There's a finance group. Annette Diorio is working with Dr. Jeff Goldstein, campus physician, and others to think about the health and safety dimension. And as you mentioned, John, there certainly is guidance that we're receiving from the state, always less specific than you might wish, because of course they don't have a crystal ball either. There's a state commission on higher education or a subcommittee working on these issues right now that has some representation that I'm in touch with. And I've been on calls a couple of times a week with other college presidents in settings that include the Deputy Secretary of Education of the state of Pennsylvania. So the state's been reaching out to college presidents and trying to keep us informed. And for those who don't know where Pennsylvania sits right now, we're at a stage where Governor Wolf has categorized different counties as in a state of either red, yellow, or green, moving through different phases of potential reopening. And we're certainly still in a red phase right now, as is much of the state. And so we would certainly have to begin any effort to reopen with the guidance that comes from understanding that the state is in the right place when the time comes. But beyond that, we'll look very carefully at all of the studies and the scientific evidence that's emerging about ways in which containment can assist us at a moment that we're not yet gifted with a vaccine, but where we hope that testing and careful monitoring of the community might put us in a position that students can be safely gathered together along with faculty and staff. One of the things we have to recognize is that different people will be coming from different places, will be in different circumstances. It seems very likely that while the online education we've carried out this spring is not what we hope to do throughout the fall, there probably will be intermittent instances of maybe being remote for some people for some period of time. It might be that some faculty won't be in a position to return to the classroom as quickly as others. There's probably a lot of variability. And so we're really looking at a variety of ways that we can be adaptable, that we can be flexible, that we can maximize the community and students' opportunity to interact with each other, which is what they enjoy most about the college experience, and to interact with their faculty and their mentors. But at the same time, we have to put the safety and the health of the community first. And it's the toughest decision I think I've ever grappled with, that the college has ever grappled with. As I mentioned, we sent out a memo earlier today, and in getting feedback on the memo, immediately some people thought the tone was not optimistic enough about our hope to open. And believe me, nobody wants to open fully and normally in the fall more than I do. Others felt that it was unduly optimistic, that it painted too bright a picture of how things might play out. And so our strategy throughout has been to keep our options open as long as possible. We're still planning, for example, a commencement for our seniors on August 1st, and we very much hope that will be possible. If it turns out it's not possible, we'll recognize that before August 1st and we'll switch gears, but we would like to plan for the things we hope will happen and do our absolute best to get there. And that's really the way we're thinking about it. And so still some work to be done. And what we've said is that we think by June 15th, we'd be in a position to announce what our sort of target scenario is for the fall, recognizing that even planning for something doesn't guarantee that it'll play out in exactly the way that we hope, and that we will have to continue to be as flexible as possible, but also as responsible as possible when health and safety is at stake.
Agreed. Yeah. Thank you for that. Looking a little bit longer term, many alumni have asked about how COVID-19 is impacting the college's thinking about its strategic goals related to affordability and distinction through growth. So perhaps you could touch on, how you're thinking and approaching the sort of longer term perspective, given the sort of shorter term concerns.
A great question. And actually, I'm very pleased that alumni are asking about that. It shows that they've absorbed the importance of those goals for the college and that they recognize, that we've labeled them as absolutely critical to the college's future, and they remain critical to the college's future. If you think about what affordability and distinction through growth as a strategy represents, it really represented the goal of affordability, meaning being able to bring the best students possible, regardless of their family's ability to pay, to Lafayette, which will make Lafayette a stronger institution. It means distinction in our programming and becoming as well-known as we can be for the unique programs that we offer. And it uses growth as a mechanism, one of several, to build revenue that helps support those two primary goals. It's clear that this year is not a growth year. We probably will, we'll be doing well if we can hit the enrollment that we had planned, and probably won't be growing in the coming year. That doesn't mean we've given up on the idea that the long-term strategy for the college might continue to involve growing the size of the student body, and we're currently not yet retreating on any of the specifics of our planned expansion. We'll have to change the pace of that. We'll have to reconsider that as the financial dust settles on this moment. But we certainly haven't ruled that out. That said, if we assume that growth is not the strategy we're pursuing over the next, say, two-year period, it still will be absolutely critical that we make Lafayette affordable to students. And in fact, a lot of our discussions now hinge on the fact that that's going to be more challenging in the current economic landscape. I can tell you that in this last admission cycle, we worked very hard at the last minute to put as much financial aid of a variety of kinds out to students, recognizing that that would really improve our competitiveness and that it would be very important for families to know that we remain committed to the goal of being as accessible as possible, to students from all income levels. And so I think that goal will remain, and I think being distinctive is absolutely critical in the future too. I think what's different is that in this moment, there's a kind of moment of regrouping, of recalibration as we think about what we've learned this spring about the flexibility that has benefited our academic program. I think we're learning a lot about student interests and needs that will translate into programming in the future. And I really think that there's a layer of sort of innovation that's likely to emerge on top of the kind of structural goals of bringing the strongest students and offering the most distinctive academic program possible. So we see those foundational goals absolutely remaining. I was just talking with the board steering committee about this in a phone call last night, absolutely committed to those same goals, at the same time recognizing that there probably will be an opportunity in the coming year, to think about what we have learned in this moment about student needs and interests, about flexibility in the curriculum, about the future of higher education and the changes in the competitive landscape. So I think that we feel good that we're in a strong position to kind of look about us, but we actually feel that the sense of direction that we've set will remain, if anything, more relevant in the future.
Right, and I will also say, just from conversations with alumni, many have felt that if, continuing down this path and remaining committed to our strategic goals, in many ways will probably allow us to emerge even stronger than we otherwise might have anticipated.
Absolutely.
So, I think there's full support from the alumni in that regard.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you.
So why don't we now transition to talk about our next topic, which is student life. Received again a lot of questions related to how the college is planning for ensuring students' well-being and safety when they return to campus. So I was hoping you could touch on some of the specifics related to how the college is making arrangements to ensure the students' safety.
I'll say a few words about that, and then I know Annette Diorio is here, and she's been heading up that effort. So in a moment, I'll call on her. But I'll begin by saying, again, I've been very touched by how anxious alums, along with, of course, parents and students, but also have been very curious about both how students are faring in the present moment and how we're planning to ensure their safety when they return next year. At the current moment, we actually have a number of students who remained on campus. You might have heard us say this before. We have about 200 students who we allowed to remain on campus because they were either international students who couldn't safely return home or who, for a variety of other circumstances, were best able to fulfill their academic programs here. And so those students remain in college housing. We're receiving 3 meals a day, which they pick up in boxes and then take back to their rooms, and are maintaining good spirits. I run into them on campus. They wear masks and they observe all the appropriate social distancing, but they are around, and I think they're really appreciating the chance to to pursue their studies here. So we've done a good job of supporting those students. We've worked hard to support the students at home in a variety of ways, and you've heard me, I think, talk about in the past, both the refund that we offered for room and board and how we tried to structure that to be as useful as possible to a range of students. And we certainly continue to get requests from students for help of various kinds, whether it's logistical, whether it's, of course, the help that career services can offer to our seniors in particular. There's been a lot of stepped up programming there, which we could talk about as well. And also in just the emotional support that's important for people as they're finishing out the academic year to feel that the college is behind them. Let me ask Annette if you would say a little bit about both what you see happening at this moment and then the planning efforts that you're engaged in terms of kind of the student experience going forward.
Thanks,
and I should have introduced Annette. I forget that maybe not everybody knows Annette. I would think they do. This is Annette Diorio, our Vice President for Campus Life.
Thanks, Allison. I think right now what we see on campus is what you described. Students are doing the best they can with a very few number on campus. There's a lot of programming that's been going on through either clubs, organizations, the Student Involvement Office in engaging both students who are on campus and already at home. So right now, I think people are focused on getting to their final exams and doing all of that wherever they are. In the fall, I think we have to be guided obviously first by what the state allows all colleges to do, and we are anxiously watching that, and it is great that you are such an active voice in the Association of Independent Colleges and are working so closely with the state on thinking about how colleges can safely reopen. Nothing is more important than the safety of our community, our students, our faculty and staff. Everything else sort of rests on top of the safety of the community. So really we're keeping a close eye on how rapid testing evolves. There's really, we can control the density of the campus a little bit. We can control the start of the semester. We can't control the trajectory of the disease. So we are doing what many colleges are doing. We're planning for multiple scenarios and trying to imagine what will create the best and safest environment for a student. As you can guess, there's probably a couple points that are trickier than others. Dining facilities, residential facilities where students are living together. Those are points that all colleges are imagining how to create the safest environment. And we're getting increasingly good guidance each day about what we can do. Again, testing, isolation, being able to really be on top of the way the disease is spreading is really critical to this. Contact tracing, all of those things that we talk about in the general community are true for our little campus community as well, because we do operate a little bit like a city, just in a smaller scale. So we are not there yet, I would say, but we have full partnership from across campus and are starting to engage student government in these conversations as well, because whatever we come up with at the end of the day will have to be a set of guidelines that all of our community can buy into in order to keep each other safe. And that's really where we're aiming.
Thank you.
And Annette, if I may just ask, because a question came in while you were speaking, for families of prospective students, is there the opportunity to actually come to campus and just walk around, even if you can't visit the buildings themselves?
Yeah, so the campus is not actually, like, obviously there's no gate around the campus, right? So the state has asked us to cease our physical operations. So while I would say we aren't overly encouraging visitors to come to campus, it's open and people can, of course, come on campus. They should obviously be wearing masks as the state is asking and doing all those things. They might see students out and about. They might see community members out and about. There are no buildings open though to walk through or nothing like that. So we really haven't been overly suggesting that folks should arrive to campus in this moment where we are right now. But if someone happened to be in town and walk through it, certainly is not something that anybody's gonna stop them from doing.
Thank you. I wanted to also just share an anecdote that was passed along to me. We've talked a lot about the campus experience, but I thought it was just worth mentioning, just so everybody on the call is aware of this. I'm just going to paraphrase, but the comment was, thank you for your leadership. I've seen how the college has helped out in Northampton County with tackling COVID-19, and this is very refreshing, and others should be aware of this as well, that we've utilized the resources and the skills and leadership within the college campus to help address the broader needs of the community. So thank you for what you're doing, and it's made me very proud to be associated with Lafayette. So I just wanted to share that anecdote that was just passed along to me.
Thank you. And I should have begun by noting that, one of the things that I've been very proud of in the response of the community has been there have been lots of not only community fundraising efforts like the student effort that's going on this week that I mentioned, but people were very quick to look at ways they could be helpful. And so whether it was, gathering supplies, extra masks and goggles from the science labs and from facilities. Some of you might have read that our 3D printers are at work printing facial shields that are being given to local hospitals. We've also made some space available. We were asked by our local first responders if we could provide some potential beds in case they need to isolate themselves from their families because of a threat of infection. And we made some space available if they need it as well. And so we have tried to be good citizens because, of course, this has had an enormous impact on Easton, the city of Easton as well. And there are lots of ways in which people have been supporting the local business community. I've been making it a point to eat out every Friday night at some place that's doing curbside pickup, and then tweeting about how terrific it was and encouraging others to do the same. So I think everyone's really trying to do their best to support the local community.
Agreed. So why don't we turn to our next topic, which is finance. And there have been a lot of questions about the financial health of the college during this time. And I know generally there's been a lot of information publicized regarding financial pressures put on all colleges as a result of COVID-19. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit about how Lafayette specifically is addressing some of these financial challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a big issue, and one that's difficult to grapple with because it involves, understanding something about the complexity of higher education and the way funding normally works at a college or university. And so recognizing that most people don't have much reason to kind of know how it works under normal circumstances, understanding how it works at a moment like this is absolutely a challenge. One of the things we've tried to focus on is a kind of phased approach where we're looking at both the immediate expense impact, the immediate challenges that the college faced just this semester, and then thinking longer term, and then thinking longer term. And so in the very short term, we had some very immediate pressures, primarily around producing a room and board refund for students. And so that was about a $7.4 million expense to the college, which you might think we would recover by students not in fact being here. But as you can imagine, of course, we don't recover anything on housing. We own the buildings. We're not, unless we were to rent them out on Airbnb, we wouldn't recover any costs from that. So that is simply simply expense. And in terms of food, actually what's recovered by allowing the dining operations to largely shut down, is not commensurate with what was required to produce a meaningful refund. And so all of that, is sort of immediate. The longer term issue has to do with the impact on the endowment of the current financial markets and the volatility there. And then really the concern about the ways in which enrollment fluctuations might be an impact that we'll feel next fall, potentially next spring as well. One of the things that, is hardest to kind of grapple with is the question of how the uncertainty that we were discussing about what the fall will look like, might impact both the students who have enrolled at Lafayette already and are planning to come in the fall, and also students who are returning, who could conceivably decide to take a gap semester or take time off if they are concerned about what the fall looks like, whether from an educational perspective or a safety perspective. People respond very differently to the same set of circumstances, and so we can't assume that we know exactly how everyone will feel about the arrangements that we put together. And so with that in mind, and also recognizing that many of our students are international students who might have difficulty getting visas to travel back here if they're incoming students, there are a lot of things that that make enrollment a little bit more volatile than it normally would be, and that's a major source of revenue for us. And so really what we're recognizing is there's a challenge in terms of just the immediate cash that was needed for the refunds, and then there's the longer term challenge of over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, the endowment will be impacted. The way in which we draw on the endowment on a rolling average means that gets kind of spread out over time, which makes it in some ways easier, but means it's a longer term issue. And in a moment, I'll turn to the expert, who is my Vice President for Finance, Roger Demoreski. But I'll sort of conclude these broad remarks by saying one of the things that this reminds us of, and it comes back to financial aid and the affordability part of our strategic direction. It reminds us that figuring out how to pay for college is challenging for families. Figuring out how to run a college like Lafayette on our resources is harder than you might think. Many people wonder, does the endowment just sit there as a rainy day fund that we admire and watch grow? We draw on the endowment every day. It supports a significant part of our operations already. Believe it or not, as high as our tuition might seem to be, it doesn't actually cover the full cost for a student. Every student gets about a 20% subsidy from the endowment. And so with all of those pieces together, any break in that chain, means that you have to make adjustments in expenses and other kinds of adjustments. And so we've been doing some very significant looking at our budgets, have announced some budget cuts and budget measures already. And I see that Roger has unmuted himself and made himself available. And so let me introduce my Vice President for Finance and Administration, Roger Demoreski. And can you say a little bit about where you see the college's finances at the moment?
Sure. So thank you, Allison, and thank you to all of you on this call for taking time and for your dedication to Lafayette. I guess I'll leave you with maybe 4 key points and one request. First, these are certainly anxious times, but there is no need to panic. We have a good team in place, and Lafayette will certainly get through this. The second point, heading into February and March, before the disease really took hold, the college was and continues to be very healthy financially. We maintain a conservative budget model, a solid endowment, and a strong cash position. And it's really through the generosity of most, if not all of you on this call, and our other donors that have made us this healthy financially. So I want to thank you for that, but that does put us in a good position, maybe slightly better than many years, to address what's in front of us. The third point is there's so much uncertainty and so many variables that our team, working with Allison and Cabinet, we're modeling various scenarios for the fall. As Annette indicated, so much of it is somewhat out of our control. But in most of those scenarios, given the changes to enrollment that we're projecting, it's hard not to come out without some operating budget loss or back to our cash position. And so, as Allison alluded to earlier, we moved pretty quickly when this started to some expense reductions. We know from the events of 2008 that the quicker schools act, the better off they are. And so we moved pretty quickly to do some expense reductions, and most likely we'll have another round of those coming out. We are also evaluating, what options we have to close a budget gap to maintain a positive cash position. There will be no one, silver bullet or one solution, but it'll be a combination of things, and I'm very confident, that Lafayette will get through this. And the last point I would make is this is not in our planning, or probably in the planning you're doing in your own lives, a one-year event. And so when we launched our strategic direction in 2016, we built a long-range financial model, and we're using that model today to see beyond next year. And I think that's how we have to think about, this event financially. It's not a 1 year and somehow we're back to what was some version of normal, but we are modeling the future. And I think the ability to do that is definitely a differentiation between us and our peers, to have a long-range model. And that's proving to be, very helpful. And my request to all of you is these are, really just times of so much uncertainty. I think we are all living history each moment and each day. And if there are any things that you could offer, either expertise, some tidbit of information about things that you've experienced in your own business or careers, we'd love to hear those. I don't think anyone has, all the answers, but a community, sort of a response will certainly get us through this.
Thank you, Roger. I actually just received a question from the audience, which is around some of the capital projects that are ongoing, the new dormitory, some of the renovation work that is planned. Maybe you could provide a brief update on where that stands at this point.
Sure. So our residence hall on McCartney Street was about maybe 85% complete before we were shut down by the governor. For some that may not know, that is actually a public-private partnership. So that is a ground lease by the college, but that is a private developer building that facility. They are back up and running, and that will be open for the start of the fall semester. Other construction projects on campus, for the most part, have been stopped. Some of the planning has continued, but in these times, we need to think about liquidity and our cash position. And so those are pretty easy areas to look to pause and defer for a short period of time to maintain, that position.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. So, so with that, I think we'll transition to enrollment, which is our next topic. Obviously, a lot of colleges are struggling with, their upcoming class of 2024 and ensuring that they meet targets. And obviously, even before COVID-19 came about, the demographic issues that exist in the Northeast, are already creating challenges. And so I was hoping, Allison, if you could speak a bit to, just how Lafayette has been able to achieve success, with enrollment recently, given its strong position, but also being mindful of some of the challenges that exist as we look forward from an enrollment standpoint.
It's a great question, because one of the things that's very fortunate about the strategic path that we have chosen is that it actually prepares us very well for this moment when now suddenly everybody is focused on enrollment. That's been a primary focus for us for the last 4 years as part of the strategic direction. The goal of the Affordability and Distinction Through Growth initiative was really to build our enrollment strength by being able to be more flexible and more generous in the financial aid we're offering. And for that reason, there's been an extraordinary focus on the enrollment division's efforts over the last few years. I can say that I, as president, follow that information and work closely with Greg, much more closely than I would venture to say not every president does. I think that we've all recognized that that the strength of the college is really the strength of our students. To be a top college means to have top-notch students, and that's what we have and what we want at Lafayette. And so we've been very strategic over the last few years in building more geographic range, in bringing a broader income base of students, a greater diversity of students. And over the last few years, we've been very successful. The quality of the student body has never been higher. The diversity of the student body has never been higher. And that's a direct result of the increase in financial aid we've been able to provide, for which many people on this call, I'm sure, deserve some credit, because the generosity of our alumni has been integral to that effort. So entering into this, we already were very focused on the strategies needed to bring in students from a wider range than had been in the case of Lafayette, maybe 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the preponderance of our students were from the tri-state area. We still have lots of students from the tri-state area, and this year we probably have more than in some past years, because it's in the nature of this event that people maybe are sticking a little closer to home. That said, we were delighted to see that in our entering class, we've got students from California, Hawaii, Colorado, Dallas, Texas, all over the world, as wide a range as is typically the case. And we worked hard to bring those students in, and in particular to give them exposure to Lafayette, even when they couldn't visit campus. In a minute, of course, I'll call on Greg McDonald, my Vice President for Enrollment, but I will say, even before he takes the stage, that the team has worked very, very hard to really enhance the personal nature of the outreach that they provide. But before asking Greg to say a little bit about how they've operated, I will note that one of the real challenges is, this year we landed May 1st with what would be about the right target number, a little short of the target we were looking for. But really what you normally want is to be several dozen above the target, because usually during the summer, there's what's called melt, when some schools start going to their wait list, and a student might leave Lafayette because they got off the wait list at Princeton. This year, people are being much more aggressive because they're still trying to fill their classes, and we may lose some students over the summer. We may also find that some international students who we've accepted and who are excited to come, aren't able to get the visas they need to travel here. And so when Roger spoke of this sort of enrollment challenge for the fall, it's a recognition that certainly if we're disrupted to a degree that minimizes our operations in the way that happened this spring, where we lost a certain amount of revenue through room and board, or you could imagine in other circumstances, certainly if we lose some students along the way because of these circumstances, that'll take a little time to recover from. That said, I feel like we're in very good shape in having been focused on a very personal approach to admissions for some time, and really in diversifying the range of our admissions operation. So I've talked too long, because Greg sometimes says that when I get started, I don't leave him enough to talk about, but he's got a lot of expertise. So I know that there's a lot he can add, especially about some of the things we've done this year in particular. So Greg McDonald. Oh, you need to unmute Greg.
Thank you. It's funny that I'm unmuting myself because I'm not sure Allison left anything for me to talk about.
Sorry
but
about that.
I will say Allison distinguished herself. I remember back in the spring of 2013, with her knowledge of enrollment matters. And I know that came from her previous institution where the enrollment division reported to her, where she served as provost. So we're fortunate to have a president who takes such great interest in the work that we do. And I'll start off by saying I don't really believe the full impact of our current events have been felt on enrollment yet. As Allison mentioned, right now, today, the class is slightly larger than it was this time last year. We're currently at 715 students. We have new leopards coming from 33 states, from 35 countries, a slight increase, as you might expect, from our tri-state, from our primary market of New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. SAT and ACT are really on par with last year. I think it's also worth pointing out half of the class enrolled through early decision, and that was pre-COVID. That was largely in January and February. So as everything was shutting down in mid-March, we were mailing and not knowing what we were going into. And I remember when the enrollment deposits first started coming early in April to the regular decision, it was such a relief. Oh, people are actually coming. This is wonderful. And they kept coming and they kept coming all the way through to last Friday when we went over 700 in the class. So we felt that our admitted students, our enrolling students, were showing great faith in what we were offering. And I think they were actually responding to the way that this community, the way our alumni, the way our staff, the way our faculty and students all pitched in to share their experiences. You must remember our entire April was done virtually. And I think it said a lot about our community, and it really enhanced our confidence that we could connect so authentically with our enrolled students, with our admitted students, and keeping them on the path to enrollment. So with that, I'll just say a huge, huge thank you to not only the enrollment team that got us here, but to the entire Lafayette community who really helped distinguish ourselves to our incoming leopards, of which we hope to see close to 700 in the fall. There is some risk involved. We have slightly fewer international students than last year. We have about 40 in a normal year. We'd be closer to 70. But with world events, we have to wonder if our international students are going to have the opportunity to get here. That said, we actually have about 30 more domestic students enrolled in the class right now. So that was encouraging to see. In terms of financial aid, we're a little bit higher than we expected to be on the first year class. We're about $500,000 above our intended first year target. But as that remains to be seen, that will shift a little bit as the aforementioned summer melt occurs. But I think a lot of people would point to two things that really worked to put us in a strong enrollment position. One, we moved to the wait list early in April as we saw the need to do that. We actually enrolled 30 students from the wait list, which normally we wouldn't be doing until after May 1st. And we successfully oversaw over 200 appeals where we enrolled both on the merit-based aid and on need-based aid appeals. And we enrolled 60 students through the appeal process. So that's an additional 90 students that otherwise wouldn't be in the class that have positioned us quite nicely as we go into the summer months.
Well, Greg, you did yourself a disservice in saying that you didn't have details to add to what I said. So appreciate that very much. And one thing maybe I would add that you didn't linger on, but that I think is emblematic of the community support. When Greg refers to doing virtual admissions events, he means literally full day events that used to take place on campus. We handled virtually. We had faculty doing meet and greets. We had panels and sessions, but we had a lot of interactive events as well. And so I think of, for example, a panel on residential life that had, a couple 150 students first-year presentations and then break into separate chat rooms and talk with current students who are RAs or admissions ambassadors about life at Lafayette. And so the students, as busy as they are at this moment, were very willing to take time. Faculty really extended themselves. Greg put out a call to faculty when this first happened and said, in the next 2 weeks, I need faculty to give me 2-minute video lectures on what they do in their department. And he got dozens of faculty producing videos and sending them right in to put on the webpage. And so, so I think enormous commitment on the part of the community to making your division successful, in addition to the great work done by your team, really led to a very good result. Again, considering the extraordinary circumstances, we feel we landed in a very good place.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate the thoughts. So with that, let's turn to our final prepared topic, which is around alumni engagement, which I know is obviously a topic near and dear to the hearts of many on this call today. We are very fortunate to have just so many dedicated volunteers, as part of the college and supporting Lafayette's mission. I know we all look forward to hopefully reconnecting in traditional settings like homecoming and reunion in the years to come. But Alison, hopefully you can talk a little bit about how the college is approaching alumni engagement in the sort of virtual world we live in right now, and how that might evolve going forward.
Sure. Well, it might be an example of one of the places where we've learned that when out of necessity we have to do some things virtually, we get some good results. I'll ask Kim Spang in a moment to speak, but I know from her experience and also from my experience, and this event too, I think is a good example of being able to get many people connected who actually wouldn't have been able to travel to campus or maybe haven't been to campus for a while. And so I've been very pleased that when we have offered opportunities for people to participate in some things that they might not have participated in the past, you actually get some folks who are come away better informed than might have been the case under conventional circumstances. That doesn't mean that we stop doing the in-person events, but that we might continue doing some of these forms of virtual connection a little bit more often because they do allow us to reach a broader audience. I think one of the things that I think about in this moment in particular is recognizing that alums are an important resource for our students, and making sure that we're able to connect students to alumni, particularly through the Gateway Career Center, and I'll ask him to say a little bit about that too, will be really important in this moment. Part of what students are signing up for and wanting when they come to Lafayette is being part of the club that is the Lafayette alumni community. Being alumni and being able to rely on the support and friendship of alumni across the country when they go out looking for jobs, when they move to a new city. All of those things are important. And it's been really exciting to see how in this moment, if anything, people have been more eager to be helpful. And students have told lots of stories about using that network and finding that 5 people immediately returned their calls and said, absolutely, I'll be happy to help you out. What do you need? And so I think that that this is actually a great moment for alumni to take an even larger role in their connection to the college, because I think the need is very clear for students, especially as they enter an uncertain job market, to have those kinds of connections to rely on, whether it's, as I said, help in a job sense, or even just, a friendly face in an alumni club when you move to a strange city for the first time. I think many of you know Vice President Kim Spang, but Kim, why don't you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with alumni?
Sure. Thank you, Alison. And Jonathan, you absolutely can jump in, because I know under your leadership, we've done so much to engage our alumni, both on campus and also off campus. COVID-19 has definitely impacted how we think about fundraising and engagement, but also has provided some wonderful opportunities. It allowed us to really adjust and shift our outreach strategies. And I'll start with something that Alison just mentioned, and you heard from Greg. The number of both our resources within our division, but the number of volunteers that really have helped on the yielding side has had such a positive impact. And I think that's been a role that our alumni have played for decades, and it's been even more important this year, as well as we think about retaining our rising sophomore, juniors, and seniors. The other piece that alumni have been really critical in helping, not just from a fundraising side, but also supporting the Gateway Career Center. So as we think about, as things start to open up and we try to evaluate where students are either with internships or job offers, I think, again, this is where our alumni will kind of rally around our students and support them in so many ways. And I know we will be reaching out to you through the Gateway Career Center and through the Alumni Association to help in that area. A couple other things, we're really thinking about from development, how do we engage alumni and parents? And we've been really conducting a lot of personal outreach. So far, we've contacted over 1,000 alumni and growing. Our most important thing is just to kind of check in with our alumni, see how things are going, while also talking about, where are the highest needs for the college. So we have really focused on top priorities, which include student assistance funds, financial aid, also supporting our student athletes, the number of coaches that are also connecting with our alums, talking about what they're doing with the programs, and also asking them to mentor our student athletes have been really helpful as well. Finally, I will just say the piece that we're working with as well with the Alumni Association and under Jonathan's leadership is thinking about those virtual events. So with reunion not happening, how can we continue to engage either through webinars, think about how faculty can be involved, again, our coaches. So we're doing a combination of small virtual events, webinars, and bigger events as well, hoping that if things open up for the fall, that we will have homecoming on campus. If not, at some point, we will think about when can we bring our alumni back on campus, and also when can we do some special events in key geographic areas, whether it's in the Northeast, West Coast, Midwest, or Southeast, or international as well. So I just want to echo what my colleagues have said, as well as Jonathan and Allison. Just thank you very much. I am always just very blessed to be part of the Lafayette community. And this is one of those times that we just kind of all pull together. And that's what makes Lafayette so special.
Great. Thank you, Kim. And I would just offer, just as an additional plug, Kim alluded to the Gateway Center and how alumni can be a resource in terms of offering internships and job opportunities. But also, if you're just in a position to be a sounding board and a mentor, we have a platform called Gateway Link, and we encourage all alumni to sign up for Gateway Link so that students can reach out to you. And I've had numerous conversations with students through that mechanism, and I found it very rewarding. And the alumni that I speak to who participate have felt the same. So, please encourage everyone to consider signing up for Gateway Link so they can at least serve as a sounding board for interested students. Great. So with that, we're at our formal Q&A session. Although we addressed a lot of the questions, during our discussion period. One topic though that has come up in a number of the questions is as we think about the student experience, and obviously we're right now focused on the very sort of short-term considerations, but has the leadership of the college have an opportunity to think about how the student experience may change in a more permanent way going forward, in terms of the on-campus activities, programming, resources, and any thoughts on the long-term sort of student experience considerations?
Well, we've certainly been thinking about both the academic experience and kind of the social experience of students in this moment, and what we've learned through the experience of having to kind of separate what happens physically on campus from the ways in which things are happening in other spaces. And one of the things that's been interesting too, as we've done our planning for fall, is recognizing that to some degree you can separate the question of where students are living, even if they're living on campus, from what sort of coursework they're pursuing and in what formats. And one of the things that I think we've learned over the course of the spring is that a lot of faculty had to be very, very flexible and creative in their course formats. It isn't simply a matter of suddenly recording lectures and putting them online, or just doing Zoom sessions instead of class. A lot of faculty have ended up with formats that combine very creatively. Some work outside of class, some work done synchronously, as we call it, online, some done asynchronously online, some of it involving more self-directed projects on the part of students, and maybe meetings as tutorials instead of class sessions. Kind of mixing those pieces up actually has proven very energizing in many course formats. And so I think we've learned a lot about things we might do in the academic program going forward, just from a kind of pedagogical perspective. I think we also recognize there's an opportunity to just get us a feel too from a curricular perspective, how this allows us to build the areas of interest that we were already investigating over the last year or two as part of our kind of strategic planning. We had already launched some new, what we were calling academic areas of focus in areas like data science and sustainability, and building some new efforts there. And so I think that as we transition, back into our next phase next year, we'll get a chance to look very strategically at those programs and their needs, and think about how probably the more intensely market-focused and competitive nature of the higher ed landscape, will tell us something about where student interests are. I think it's it's a little early to say what the sort of student experience from a kind of activities and social and athletics dimension might look like. I think there's the short-term question of just literally how will those things play out next year, and on what kind of timetable can we phase some things back in. But then there's the kind of longer-term question of just what are students looking for from college, and how do we understand that differently when we've kind of tested that. I will say one of the things that's most actually encouraging about, in an odd way, about this experience is it reminds you that the things that are fundamental to Lafayette, students still want. What they miss is not, the nicest facilities, or it's not, kind of the beauty of the campus. Those things students certainly regret. What they miss is the chance to be together and have conversations about the things they're doing. What they miss is the chance to walk into a faculty member's office and sit down and chat. The things that are the kind of fundamental community pieces have not changed. And so I think that while a lot of this is a sort of test for higher education in terms of, what is the value attached to being together, as opposed to what might seem simpler, in this moment safer, and certainly many would imagine less expensive modes of education that could take place online. I think this, if anything, bolsters the case for people coming together. But what coming together looks like, I think, will be, could conceivably be quite different. I would conclude by saying already an integral part of our strategic direction was the assumption that one of the values of diversity is that bringing students together to learn, particularly when they're learning from students who are not identical to themselves in their own backgrounds and interests, that has an enormous value that's quite different from learning something on your own. And I think that because we have already built a lot of our programming around the assumption that being together is in and of itself educational, that participating in athletics and extracurriculars is actually part of your education, that I think has become an even stronger part of how we think about Lafayette. Those pieces are not separable. You can't simply say, cut that piece off and simply leave the bare bones of the classes. I think we recognize that the classes flourish when they're surrounded by all of the other opportunities for engagement and conversation that surround them. So I would say we probably will engage in some longer term planning next year as things kind of settle down. I think we'll be in a position to do some taking stock and looking at what we've accomplished and what we've tested and learned. And so I hope that there will be some opportunities to build some more formal kind of planning and evaluation processes around the experience that we're going through. But I also think that it's, we're an educational institution. We all love to learn, and we're certainly learning a lot in this moment.
Great. Well, I think with that, we will conclude a lot of the questions that came through, and thank you to everybody for submitting those questions. We were able to address through our discussion. I also know that in light of the current situation and sort of unpredictability in the future, it is very possible that we may have additional virtual sessions like this going forward. So please continue to stay connected, engage with the college, and take advantage of the virtual opportunities that are available. I would also just make a plug for the website that everyone can go to for information. That's leopardlink.lafayette.edu. So please make use of that resource to stay informed. And I look forward to seeing many of you in the near future. So please stay healthy, enjoy the weekend, and on behalf of the entire alumni community, thank you, President Byerly and your cabinet and the entire college for all that you do. During obviously what's a very difficult time, but your leadership is really inspirational, and I know will put Lafayette in a stronger position in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you today. And again, let me echo Kim's thanks for your leadership. It's not easy to be a leader of an alumni community that is dispersed and invisible, but we can feel their presence. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.